I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to sit here and pour out my story on some anonymous forum, but honestly, I'm at the end of my rope. My name's Mark, and this is about the worst betrayal I've ever had to face. I was supposed to get married in less than 2 weeks. Everything was perfect, at least I thought it was. I had my girl, Lisa, smart, beautiful, seemingly perfect. We planned the wedding down to the last detail. I'd never doubted her, not once. She was my everything. Until the morning I found out the truth. It was about 4 a.m. and I was half asleep when I heard the faintest noise. It was unusual because Lisa was always a deep sleeper. My bed is right next to the window and I sleep with the curtains open because I like the early morning light. But that night I woke up to a faint rustling, then muffled voices. My stomach dropped. I sat up, eyes darting around the room trying to focus. That's when I saw them, Lisa and my best friend Jason. They were creeping out of our bedroom window, both dressed in dark clothes, sneaking away like thieves. My blood ran cold. They weren't just talking, they were sneaking out, trying not to get caught. I couldn't believe my eyes. My mind was racing. What the hell was going on? They looked guilty, hurried, desperate almost. I sat there for a second, stunned. My palms turned clammy. I couldn't breathe right. I didn't move at first. Just watched them disappear into the darkness, disappearing out of my life, out of my trust. I didn't even have words. My heart pounded so loud I was sure they'd hear it upstairs. My stomach clenched and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I felt betrayed, humiliated, like the ground was shifting beneath me. The worst part, I had no idea what they were doing or where they were going. Were they just sneaking out to talk, or, God forbid, they were more than friends? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the evidence was staring me in the face. I'd never suspected Jason of anything, and Lisa, well, she was mine. The woman I'd trusted with everything. I lay back in bed trying to process it all. My mind kept circling around what I saw. My fingers clenched into fists. My jaw hurt from grinding my teeth so hard. I felt numb, like I'd been punched in the gut. I kept thinking, how the hell did I miss this? How could I have been so blind? We'd been planning the wedding for months. I told myself she was faithful, that she loved me. That was a lie, wasn't it? The thing was, I didn't want to wake her up. Not yet. I didn't want to confront her while she was asleep, in a state of innocence that I knew was about to shatter. I needed to think, to plan. But the one thing I knew for sure, this wasn't something I could just brush under the rug. Not anymore. My whole trust had been smashed into pieces, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff with no way back. I stayed awake the rest of the night, staring at the ceiling, replaying what I saw. Every now and then, I'd glance over at her, sleeping peacefully, unaware that I'd seen everything. The betrayal hit me harder than I thought it would, and all I kept asking myself was, who was she? Was she even the woman I thought I loved, or was I just kidding myself all along? When morning finally came, I got out of bed and quietly started planning what to do next. I needed answers. No, I needed the truth. I knew I couldn't confront her blindly. I had to be smart, but one thing was clear. I couldn't trust her anymore. Not completely. Maybe not at all. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let this slide without consequences. That's when I started thinking about how I was going to handle this. How do you deal with a betrayal like that? How do you look the person in the eye after you've seen them sneaking out of your room with your best friend? That question kept echoing in my head, and I knew, from that moment, my life was about to change forever. I spent the next few hours pretending everything was normal, though inside I was anything but. I kept my face calm, my voice steady when I asked her breakfast preferences, but my mind was racing. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. Was this just a one-time thing, or had they been sneaking around? For weeks, the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I had to find proof. I couldn't just accuse them blindly and ruin everything based on a gut feeling. I decided to do some digging. My first step was to check her phone, safe, simple, and potentially revealing. I knew I was crossing a line, but I couldn't trust her anymore. I found her phone on the kitchen table when she went to the bathroom. It was unlocked. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I was careful not to leave fingerprints, not that I thought she'd suspect me before I had concrete evidence. Scrolling through her messages, I saw nothing unusual yet. Her texts with friends, some memes, a few work emails. Nothing that screamed infidelity. But then I remembered the way she'd looked last night, the way she'd been acting a little too nervous. I kept digging, opening her photo gallery. That's when I saw it. A photo of her with Jason taken last weekend at a bar, practically kissing, their faces inches apart. The caption read, "Finally got you alone." My stomach turned. I stared at the screen, blood draining from my face. That was the smoking gun I needed. She had been hiding something. I downloaded the picture knowing I'd need it later. I was about to put her phone back when I noticed something else, a notification from her email account. An email draft titled "Sorry" addressed to someone named Mike. I opened it and my eyes widened. She was apologizing for the mistake and saying she didn't mean for Jason to find out. She was hiding something even bigger. I sat there, trembling. My mind was spinning. How deep was this? Had she really been cheating all along? Was Jason just a pawn or more involved? The thought made my fists clench so tightly I almost hurt myself. But I knew I couldn't just confront her yet. I had to be strategic. Later that day, I planted a tiny voice recorder in the living room. I didn't want to miss anything. I wanted her to think she'd caught me off guard, but really, I was gathering everything I needed to destroy her. When I played it back in the evening, I heard her and Jason arguing about the wedding. She told him she wasn't sure she wanted to go through with it because she was confused, and he told her not to worry, that they'd figure something out. That was it, the confirmation I needed. Seeing her lie so casually, so convincingly, made me angrier than I'd ever been. I realized I had to come up with a plan to make her regret everything. But what kind of revenge could I take? I wasn't interested in hurting her physically. No, I wanted her to feel the way I did. Betrayed, humiliated, powerless. I decided that exposing her in front of everyone was the way to go. I had to make sure she understood what she lost, what she almost threw away for some fleeting moment of pleasure. I also knew I'd need backup. Jason, her supposed best friend, was just as guilty. I wasn't going to ruin their lives overnight, but I would make sure they paid. I kept my thoughts to myself for now, but I was already plotting how to make sure they both understood the damage they'd done. By the end of the day, I felt a strange mix of calm and fury. I'd found the evidence I needed, and now I knew exactly how I was going to serve. Justice, no more guessing, no more doubts. The truth was out there and I was going to use it. I just had to be patient and precise, because once I made my move, there would be no coming back from it. And honestly, I was done trusting anyone, especially not Lisa and Jason. That much was clear. The days that followed felt like walking on thin ice. Each morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach, knowing I had everything I needed but nowhere to put it yet. I was careful to act normal around Lisa, like I hadn't just uncovered her secret life. She was oblivious, or maybe she was pretending to be, but I could see the nervous flicker in her eyes sometimes. She was wary, maybe sensing I knew more than I was letting on. I kept the evidence close, pictures, the secret recordings, the draft email, and started planning my next move. I wanted her to feel the weight of what I knew, but at the same time, I didn't want to give her any indication I was onto her. I was trying to stay calm, but inside I was boiling. I kept replaying that moment. In my mind, when I saw her sneaking out, her face lit by the pale glow of dawn, Jason close behind. That image burned in my mind as a reminder that I was done trusting her. One evening, I waited until she was out of the house, pretending to run errands. I needed her to be alone so I could confront her, but I wasn't ready yet. Instead, I called Jason. I didn't bother with small talk. I cut straight to the point. "I know what you both did." "Don't bother denying it," I said, voice low but steady. "I've got proof, I know everything." There was a pause on the other end, then Jason finally spoke, voice tense. "Look, Mark, I didn't mean for it to get this far. It was just one stupid mistake. We're not hurting anyone." "Wrong," I cut him off sharply. "You're hurting me, and if I find out you're lying, I swear you'll regret it. Stay away from her and stay away from me, or I'll make damn sure everyone knows what you've been up to." After hanging up, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with a kind of cold fury. I had them cornered and I was ready to make a move. The thing was, I didn't want to just confront her directly yet. That could backfire. I needed her to realize I knew, to break her down without her even knowing I was the one pulling the strings. I decided to send her an anonymous message, something vague but enough to make her nervous. I typed out, "Stop pretending, I saw everything. You're not the person I thought you were." I left it in her email inbox, then sat back and watched her open it. Her face paled. She looked around, panicked, then quickly checked her phone, eyes darting across the screen. I saw her shoulders stiffen. That night I stayed up late, waiting for her to come home. When she finally did, she looked tense, like she'd been caught doing something she knew she shouldn't. She avoided eye contact and headed straight for the bedroom, but I kept my distance. I knew she was feeling the pressure now. She received the message, and I knew she'd get paranoid. She'd start to crack. The next day, I made sure to keep my cool. I went to work as usual, but I had a plan. I'd arranged for her to think she still had some control, that she could keep lying to herself. That was until I finally confronted her face to face, with all the evidence laid out and her little secret exposed. I wanted her to see she was cornered, that there was no way out this time. That evening, I sat her down in the living room, the evidence spread out on the table in front of us, screenshots, the email draft, the photo. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. She looked like a girl who'd been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. "Lisa," I said, voice cold and steady, "you've been lying to me from the start. I know about the nights you and Jason sneaked out. I know about the messages, the photos. Tell me, was it just sex, or was there something more?" She swallowed hard, tears gathering in her eyes. "Mark, I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake." "Save it," I snapped. "You betrayed me, and I don't think I can ever trust you again. We're done. I want you out of my life by the end of the week. And Jason, don't think I won't come after him if I catch him near you again." Her face crumpled, but I felt nothing but cold resolve. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I'd let her walk all over me, but not anymore. Not after I'd seen everything. As she packed her things, I watched her with a mixture of anger and relief. I'd finally taken control of the situation, and I wasn't going to let her worm her way back in. I wondered how she would react once she realized I wasn't going to be the fool she'd taken for so long. The aftermath would be messy, but I was prepared for that. I closed the door behind her, hearing the click that meant she was gone. I felt a strange lightness, as if a heavy weight had been lifted, but also a hollow ache that I knew wouldn't go away anytime soon. Still, I was free. And she? Well, she was the one who lost it all. The house felt different after Lisa left. Quiet, almost eerily so. I kept walking around, noticing every small detail: the empty space in the closet where her clothes used to hang, the bed that no longer had her scent on the sheets. It was like I'd been holding my breath for days, and finally I could breathe again. But beneath that, there was this gnawing feeling, an uneasy mix of relief and hollow emptiness. I'd thought I'd feel victorious, but mostly I just felt exhausted. I spent the next few days trying to process what had happened. The betrayal had a way of clouding everything. I couldn't stop replaying that night in my head, the sneaking out, the whispers, the way her face looked in the dark. I kept asking myself, how could I have missed it? How did I not see the signs? The truth was, I'd been naive. I'd trusted her so blindly that I didn't notice when she started drifting away, when her phone became more important than us. But I wasn't going to drown in regret. I knew I had to do something about Jason. I couldn't just let him walk free after what he'd done. I reached out to a private investigator I knew from work, someone discreet, someone who knew how to dig up dirt without leaving a trace. I didn't want to ruin his life, but I wanted him to know I wasn't someone to mess with. I wanted him to feel the same pain I felt. Over the next week, I watched Jason's social media, his posts, his messages, everything. I learned he had a little apartment, a new girlfriend, and that he was talking about how things got complicated with Lisa. I knew I couldn't just confront him directly yet. I had to be patient. The goal was to make him understand that I knew exactly what he'd done, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Meanwhile, I kept myself busy with work and avoiding the house. I didn't want to sit alone in the silence and let my mind spiral. I was angry, yes, but I was also calculating. I wasn't going to let Jason or Lisa think I was broken. I needed to be stronger. The revenge I had in mind wasn't about throwing punches or yelling. It was about making them see they'd lost something real, something they'd taken for granted. One evening, I finally made my move. I sent Jason a message. "I know what you did. If you Want to talk? Meet me tomorrow at the old warehouse on 5th. Alone. I knew he'd be nervous, anyone would, because I was serious. I had proof and I was ready to show him I wasn't bluffing. I wanted him to realize that crossing me had consequences. The next day I waited in the shadows of that old warehouse. It was abandoned, dark, and quiet, perfect for a face-to-face. When Jason finally arrived, he looked nervous, shifts in his stance, hands in his pockets. I stepped out of the shadows and stared him down. "You think you're clever, huh?" I said, voice steady but cold. "You think sneaking around with my was just a bit of fun? I've got every message, every photo, every lie documented. You're lucky I don't want to ruin your life, yet." He looked guilty, eyes darting around. "Look, Mark, I didn't mean for it to get this bad. It was just a mistake." "Save it," I cut him off. "You don't get to explain. You're lucky I don't blow this wide open right now. But I'm giving you a chance. Stay away from her, stay away from me. Or next time be so nice." He nodded, jaw clenched. "Yeah, I get it, I won't bother you again." I let the silence hang, then turned away. I'd made my point. Jason understood I wasn't playing. I wasn't going to let him get away with it, not without some consequences. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he'd lost, just like I did. But this wasn't the end of it. I had one more card to play, a final, calculated move to make sure they both paid in full. I'd been planning it for days, waiting for the right moment. I knew Lisa had kept some of her things at her friend's house just a few streets away. That's where I was heading now, to retrieve what I needed. I wanted to make sure they knew I wasn't going to let this slide without them feeling the sting. As I approached her apartment, I could feel my heart pounding again. Not from fear, no, from something darker. From the satisfaction that I was about to give her a taste of her own medicine. I had no intention of hurting her physically. That wasn't my style. But I was going to make her regret ever crossing me. I slipped in unnoticed, grabbed a few of her belongings, some jewelry, a couple of personal items, and left quietly. I kept everything in a small box. When I finally got back home, I stared at it for a long moment. That box was proof that I was done being the victim. Now I was the one in control. I knew what I had to do next. I was ready to confront her again, but this time with everything laid out on the table. Because once she saw I'd taken back my power, there would be no way she could deny what she'd done. I wasn't just ending the relationship, I was ending her trust forever. And deep down, I knew that was the only way I was going to get closure. The night I decided to make my final move, I felt a strange mix of calm and chaos. The box with her belongings sat on my desk, heavy in my hands. I'd carefully placed everything she seemed to care about, the jewelry, a few personal mementos. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just angry, I was done playing nice. I wanted her to feel how it was to be completely powerless, just like I had. I didn't want to do this in a way that would hurt her physically. That wasn't the point. I just needed her to understand that she had lost everything she thought she could get away with. Taking her keys was step one. I kept them in my pocket all day, feeling their weight, knowing they were the last tangible link to her. Without them, she was really gone. By evening, I was ready. I waited until I knew she'd be out visiting her friend. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I took the box and quietly moved through the house. I was careful, no noise, no signs I'd been there. I needed her to come home and find her things, but I didn't want her to suspect I was behind it. I left the box in her bedroom, right on her pillow. Then I took her keys from my pocket, opened her purse, and slipped them inside. I closed the door quietly and waited in the living room. My heart was pounding, not from fear but from a strange sense of victory. I had finally taken control. When she finally returned, she opened the door and froze. Her eyes widened when she saw the box, the keys, and the look of pure disbelief on her face. She approached it slowly, trembling, and then her eyes fell on the keys. Her lips parted and she looked at me with a mixture of anger, shock, and something I couldn't quite read. "Lisa," I said, voice cold but steady, "this is over. You want to keep lying, keep sneaking around, keep hurting people. That's your choice, but I'm done. The house, the relationship, it's finished. You're not coming back, not ever." Her voice caught in her throat. "You're serious?" "I'm dead serious," I said, taking a step closer. "You betrayed everything we had. I don't want you in my life anymore. You're free to go, don't come back. And I suggest you keep your distance because I'm not interested in playing nice anymore." She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, but I just stared back, unyielding. I handed her the keys. Here. Take your stuff, take your keys, just go. She hesitated, then grabbed the box and keys from the bed, her face twisted in pain. But I knew this was what she deserved. I didn't want her to be some victim of my revenge. I wanted her to see the consequences of her actions, to feel the cold sting of loss. Watching her walk out the door, I felt a strange sense of relief. Like I'd finally taken back control. Like I'd reclaimed my life from a betrayal I never saw coming. Sure, it hurt. Sure, it stung deep. But I knew I'd done what I had to do. And as I closed the door behind her for the last time, I realized one thing for sure. From this moment forward, I'd never let anyone betray me like that again. Trust, once broken, is impossible to fully repair. But I could build my life again on my terms. That was the real victory. The house felt emptier than ever after she left that night. I stood in the living room, staring at the empty doorway, clutching the small box that now seemed like a symbol of everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. The silence was deafening. For a moment, I wondered if I'd gone too far, if I'd crossed a line I couldn't come back from. But then I remembered the look in her eyes when she saw her keys and her belongings, the way she'd hesitated, the guilt that finally cracked her facade. I knew I'd made the right choice, even if it hurt like hell, because I wasn't just ending a relationship, I was reclaiming myself. For too long, I'd been blind, trusting someone who had been sneaking around behind my back. That betrayal had shattered the foundation of my world. Now, I was rebuilding it from the ground up, stronger and more cautious. I sat down on the couch, took a deep breath, and finally let myself feel the weight of everything. The anger, yes, the heartbreak, definitely, but also a strange sense of liberation. I'd taken control, handled the pain, and refused to be a victim anymore. That was the real victory. As I looked around, I saw the small things, photos of us together, the shared memories, the future we planned, all now meaningless. Yet I realized that in some strange way I was better off without her. Trust was something you built slowly, and once broken, it's almost impossible to fix. I'd learned that the hard way. I got up and went to the window, watching the street. The cold night air brushed against my skin. It was quiet, just the distant sounds of cars passing by. I felt a strange peace settle over me, mixed with a lingering bitterness. But I knew I had to move forward. I had to let go of the past and focus on what was ahead. I reached into my pocket and pulled out her keys one last time. I held them in my hand, feeling their familiar weight, then slowly dropped them into the nearby trash can. Watching them go felt symbolic, like shedding the last remnants of the betrayal. I was done with her, done with the lies, done with the chaos. I took a long, steady breath. My mind was clear now. I could finally start healing. The pain would fade, but the lessons wouldn't. Trust is fragile, betrayal is brutal, but I'd survived. I'd come out on the other side stronger, knowing that I was capable of standing tall even after the worst. I looked at the empty house one last time, then turned away, ready to face whatever came next. I knew I'd build a new life, one without her. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the faintest spark of hope flicker inside. Because no matter how deep the betrayal, life goes on. And so would I.